Hey, this is Tim Charles from Ne Obliviscaris, and you are watching RichardMetalFan.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Richard Metal Fan Interviews. This is episode number 109, and today's guest we're talking to Tim Charles. Tim Charles is the clean vocalist and violinist for the band Ne Obliviscaris, kind of a progressive, melodic death metal band, whatever you want to classify him as, from Australia. Today we're going to be talking to him about basically what got him into classical music first and then into metal, as well as talking about the history of Ne Obliviscaris and their upcoming album, Exul, which comes out March 24th through Season of Mist Records. So without further ado, let's go talk to Tim. So what's up, guys? I am here with Tim Charles from Ne Obliviscaris. How are you doing today, Tim?
I'm doing well. Excited to be here chatting with you.
It's so awesome to have you here. So kind of the format is I want to do like a rundown of your catalog, as well as talk about the new album, and I also want to talk about like your journey as an artist from where you start to now. But before we go into that, and I always ask people what was the first bands that got them into metal, but honestly before that, I don't think you were into metal first. It was classical music. So where were you when you first heard classical music for the first time?
So my mom played the piano, and so I guess my earliest memories of classical music is my mom playing Chopin nocturnes on the piano as a little kid. When I was about 6, she asked if I wanted to play an instrument, and I said the violin, and she was a bit confused about how I got interested in it because no one in the family had played it or anything like that, and she was a pianist, and kind of just started from there. I mean, so I guess that initial exposure to music was with classical violin from that young age of 6. But then for me, when I got into high school, I really got into a lot of like punk and hardcore music. And then from there got into metal. And so I had this kind of two things where, like, by the time I was kind of 16, 17 years old, I was kind of, a metalhead. And at the same time, I was like the classical music kid, like playing pretty violin music. And both kind of existed quite separately for many years in that musical journey, I guess.
Awesome. Do you remember like the first bands you heard that got you into metal? That really just was first time you heard it was like, whoa, what is this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for when it comes to metal, I have a really unoriginal answer, which is that I was watching like an Australian music video show, um, and I saw a Metallica video for their song One, and this was probably in 1993, so I was like 11. And that was like the first metal song I ever heard. And I wasn't really into metal after that, but I was like, wow, that song by Metallica was incredible. I remember hearing Black Hole Sun by Soundgarden, and that was something like a bit alternative that I kind of really got into. And then it was like stuff like the Offspring's, the Offspring's like early stuff, which was very different to when they went a bit more commercial a few years later. And it was kind of a bit more intense and quicker, and and then kind of from there. But a lot of the time, like in that kind of like early teen years, like my favorite bands were more like Pennywise or NoFX, or I listened to hardcore stuff like Madball or Vision of Disorder. And on the metal side, it was really, I guess, when I think about metal bands that I really, really fell in love with in those early days, it was Deftones was one of my favorite bands, and still are. I absolutely love the Deftones. Machine Head, Fear Factory, a lot of that, I guess, American metal, Pantera. And then it was probably only when I was about 17, 18, I remember I discovered the first European metal band that I ever kind of discovered and got into with that kind of different European sound was Soilwork's Chain Heart Machine. And when I heard that, all of a sudden, within a few months of hearing that, I was listening to In Flames and Dark Tranquillity and Opeth and all sorts of different things. But the first one that kind of branched off down that road was Soilwork and their Chain Heart Machine album. So it was kind of that epic journey, which then ends up going down into Emperor and Satyricon and down more extreme musics, as the years went on.
Awesome. And so were you in any bands before you formed Ne Obliviscaris? Was Ne Obliviscaris your first band?
I mean, it was pretty much my first band. I mean, I played in like a band in high school. I was actually the singer, which was kind of like a heavy rock band. We probably sounded a bit more like a Korn ripoff band, but we didn't really do anything. We just played like a battle of the bands thing at school and stuff like that when I was probably 17. One of the reasons why I started singing a bit was because I never considered that you could play violin in a metal band. And I really wanted to play in a band. So when I was 17, 18, I started teaching myself guitar. I started trying to do a bit of singing because I thought maybe that was my ticket to playing in a band. And I really wanted to do that for fun. I wasn't thinking about a career. I was thinking classical violin for career. And I wanted to like play in a band for fun. And so, ending up being able to combine those things in Ne Obliviscaris was kind of incredible turn of events, which I hadn't really considered that much until it happened.
Awesome. And so how did Ne Obliviscaris form? Because I believe you all formed in 2003, and also this year marks the 20 years of being in a band. Did you ever think that you guys would be around for 20 years?
Yeah, no, not really. Yeah, so basically September 2003 is when I joined the band. I was the final founding member of the original lineup. And how I came to be in the band was essentially, Zen and I just came across each other on, a metal forum online. He was kind of looking for a classical instrument to add to this band that he was starting, because he was kind of the person that had the idea to put the band together, and he liked the idea of adding a cello or a violin and or something like that. And we just kind of came across each other on a forum, and I think I'd mentioned that I was a violinist, and he kind of mentioned, he kind of sent me a PM noting that, hey, he was had a band that he was starting up, and would I be interested in coming down and having a jam. And it kind of went from there. I learned for the audition, I learned how to play this violin song from this song called a violin solo from a song called Angina by Tristania, which has this really fantastic violin solo in it. And it was one of the only metal songs I ever heard with a really prominent violin solo, and with a violinist who was actually played across the whole record. That was very rare, 20 years ago. And I played this solo for Zen, and he was so impressed because he knew the song, and he was like, "Oh wow! Like I've never heard a violinist actually be able to play that." And we got on really well, and it kind of went from there.
Yeah, and tell me about like your first release from 2007. You did a demo called "The Aurora Veil." It just sounds very raw sounding with a couple of the songs that would end up on Portal Vi. Where was that recorded at?
Yeah, so I mean, we recorded that, I think about we recorded that late 2006. It came out April 2007, and we always referred to that because it was kind of an EP, but at the same time, we had a lot of songs in the works at that time, and we wanted to include them in our debut album, because we thought, hey, Forget Not, it had Tapestry of the Stars, Abstract, As Icicles Fall. That was kind of the three songs. And we thought, these are album quality songs. We want to include them on our debut album, but we need to put out something, because we hadn't released anything at that time, just so that we could help us get shows and help kind of get our music out there, because we had nothing to show to people. And we'd started playing live in 2006. I mean, that demo that we did was really just an introduction, I guess. Those were the first three songs that we were really proud of. We had written a bunch of stuff in the few years before that where we were trying to find our sound. And those were the first songs where I was like, oh, this sounds like something different and at a much higher quality than the stuff we had written before that. Like a bunch of things really clicked into place with those songs, which was great. The challenge was that pretty much as soon as it came out, our lead guitarist Corey King left the band. And at that time, like him and myself were the main songwriters. And so like one of the two main songwriters was gone. And it was trying to work out, okay, what do we do now? And it was then the whole journey, which then took a number of years of finding a new lead guitarist, which was Benjamin Barret. He moved to France. This was about a year later, that we managed to find a guitarist. He moved to Australia. And then there was all these issues with his visa. So it kind of really delayed the whole process of then creating Portal of Eye, because Portal of Eye, our first album, we started recording that late 2009, but that wasn't released till May 2012, almost 3 years later, because of some of the issues we had with his visa initially getting denied when we tried to get it extended. And we ended up doing a big petition online, which had thousands of fans signing it, trying to prove to the Australian government that he was important enough that he should be given a visa in Australia. And so everything just took forever. So in that first 9 years of being in a band, really nothing really went right. And we kind of would half joke, at the time quite often that we felt like we were a bit cursed, because every time we took a step forward, it was 2 steps back. And that was always really the way through that first, 9 years of the band's existence.
Yeah, and tell me about this album, because I know last year was the 10-year anniversary of this album, one of the best debut albums. And I've had Zen on here like almost 2 years ago, and I think it got signed to like Code 666, which I've heard was a little Italian label that found you guys.
Yeah. So basically, like it's funny, when that band, when that album came out, in the time preceding, like the band almost barely existed in 2011. Pretty much, like we recorded late 2009, and really soon after recording drums, like Dan actually quit the band early 2010. Like not everyone is even aware of that. And 2010, he left, and we've finished recording most of it. And then Benji got deported because his visa expired and they didn't give him a new one. And everyone was kind of like, we don't have a drummer. Our lead guitarist is stuck in France. Like, are we even going to continue? The album wasn't done. It was dragging on forever. And so in 2011, after the album had been sitting there, like 80-90% completed for a long time, pretty much just myself and Troy McCosker got together to just finish the record. It was like mostly it was recorded, but there was a lot of compiling and editing and all sorts of stuff that hadn't been done. It wasn't ready to go off and be mixed yet, and blah, blah, blah. And really through that year, the band didn't really exist beyond just me and Troy working together on putting it together. And then, in late 2011, we finally got the good news that Benji's new visa was approved, and he'd been out of Australia for about a year and a half at this time. And so it was then going back to the guys and saying, hey, like, are you willing to come back? Because no one had quit, like, except for Dan, like none of the other guys had quit. But at the same time, the band like literally hadn't done anything in a year and a half or something like that at that time. And so we kind of had a bit of a chat. Everyone agreed to come back. I remember at that time, we reached out to Dan saying, hey, do you want to come back and do like an album launch tour? And he kind of wasn't interested. So we got Nelson Barnes in on drums. And he was like the new drummer of the band at that time for the Portal of Eye tours. And it was really just, let's do a launch tour for Portal of Eye, and then we'll work it out. So really, the existence of the band, the only thing we'd worked out was, let's do like an Australian tour to launch the album. And it was just released through my record label, Welcome Records, here in Australia. and that was all we had organized. And then basically about a month before the album came out, Code 666, an Italian label, hit us up. We'd released Plague as a single on YouTube a few months earlier.
Great song, by the way.
And thank you. And we had sent the album to many record labels, like all of the main record labels, and no one was interested in signing us, except for Code 666. It was I'm not even sure if we got any other offers at all for that album. Anyway, so they hit us up, and so we, at the last minute, we organized an international release through them, which was pretty small, and that came out internationally like a little bit after the Australian release. But from that moment, the album came out, all of a sudden everything changed. Like Season and Mist offered us a record deal like 2 weeks after Portal of Eye came out. So like we didn't even get a response from them beforehand, but it was literally the album came out, and within 2 weeks they were like, hey, like, we love this record. Do you have a contract? And they wanted to sign us for a 3-album deal, which we did. And that was kind of, I guess, the tipping point where all of a sudden we did this launch tour in Australia. The tour did really well. It was the biggest crowds that we had. And I was like, oh my God, like the band's barely existed for a couple of years. But as soon as we put out Portal of Eye, there was this momentum created. And then that was when, maybe about 6-12 months after Portal of Eye came out, we were having chats with Dan again. And he came back and rejoined the band after having, spent a couple of years, 2 or 3 years out of it. And onwards we went from there, because we got Season and Mist on as a record deal. We were able to start talking to booking agents overseas, and that really, I guess, Portal of Eye wasn't really a huge selling album because it was such a small label and all that sort of stuff initially, but it was the quality of that release that really helped set up everything that happened after that, like with the success then of Citadel and us being able to start touring the world. And that was really on the back of Portal of Eye and that gaining us some traction.
Yeah, and then moving on to the second album, Citadel. Usually with the debut album, you have your entire life to write, right? And then there's a lot of hype with that first album. Did you feel like pressure to follow up Portal of Eye going into Citadel?
I mean, yes and no. We always try really hard when we're writing to just focus on the songs. And so like when we're in the room writing, and back then that was the way we wrote, we would jam every weekend together pretty much all day on Sundays, and we would write music, and that was kind of how we did it back then when we all lived in the same city. And in those moments, you just write the songs. I guess where there was the difference was that most of Citadel was written in maybe about a 6-month period, like the majority of it, where we just jammed every Sunday for about 6 months and would work on stuff in between during the week. But it was written in that 6-month period, whereas Portal of Eye was written over maybe about a 5-year period. The songs that were on that album were kind of written between 2005 and 2009. And obviously that's then really different. For Portal of Eye, we had 2 hours of music to choose from. Whereas with Citadel, there was nothing left over. It was like we had riffs in here left over, but it was, we wrote a song expecting that this was going to be a song that was on the album. And if we finished a song, it wasn't, pretty much automatically on the record, because if we weren't happy with it, it just wouldn't get finished. And so it's just a really different process. But I think that's one of the reasons why Citadel sounds a little bit more focused and a little bit more similar in sound across the record. Like Portal of Eye is very, very broad. Like every song is quite different on that record because it was written over 5 years. Citadel was written that 6-month, and it sounds more like it was written, I think, in the one period compared to Portal of Eye.
Yeah, and I still think this is actually, believe it or not, the album that got me into you guys. I had a buddy of mine tell me about it, and heard it, and I pretty much dug it, and I pretty much checked out, I think it was before Earn, but this album is definitely my favorite Ne Obliviscaris album. Oh man, tell me about like the touring for that, because now that you're signed to Season of Mist, what was that like? Did you start like touring outside of Australia for the first time?
Yeah, so the first time we toured outside of Australia, we did an Asian tour in 2013, which was all, pretty like small headline shows across Asia, which was a lot of fun and a good learning experience. And we just paid for that by just putting our own money. Like each of us saved up several $1,000s each to pay for our flights and getting there and all that sort of stuff. And we didn't get any of that money back. It was just an investment to be able to finally play somewhere else outside of Australia. With the build up to Citadel, we had booking agents interested in the US and Europe in signing us to their agencies, and we had opportunities that were potentially on the cards, but we didn't have any money, and we were like, maybe we can save up our own money again, like we did for the Asian tour, and just blow it all on a tour. But if we do that, we can only really do one tour. And it's like, well, but if we want the band to grow, we can't just go to the US or just go to Europe or something like that. Like we need to go all these places. So, it was about, I think, July, August 2014, we did a world tour crowdfunding campaign, and we, set a target of 40,000 Australian dollars, which is about maybe 30,000 US, roughly. And we hit that target in about 38 hours.
Oh wow!
And we end up raising about $86,000 Australian, which broke the record for crowdfunding in Australia for a music act. And that was basically how we financed the world tour. So we had this money. I mean, $86,000 sounds like a lot, but obviously we were creating EPs and T-shirts and blah blah blah. So about half of that was money that we had to spend. But when we spent it going to Europe, festivals. In 2015, we were really fortunate. Like our agent got us all these incredible festivals, playing a lot of the biggest festivals in Europe, and Grass Pop and Hellfest and Metal Days, like all of these different festivals across Europe. And it was quite amazing because we had a lot of bands, that some of them that were bigger than us, saying like, hey, how are you guys playing like so many festivals? Because we played about 12, maybe 12, 13 festivals that summer, and which is a lot for a band like us that was pretty unknown at that time. But it really helped us, because we got a bit of hype from the European festivals. Some of the members of Cradle Filth saw us play. Yeah. Like we'd actually opened for them a couple of years earlier, yeah, and we'd met Lindsay and become friends with her. And then we were playing, yeah, I think when we were playing maybe Brutal Assault, I think they were there, and so Lindsay got like Danny and the other guys to come check us out. At one of the festivals, I think maybe it was that. And then literally like as we were going home from that tour, we got an offer to then be the main support for Cradle of Filth through Europe, like about 2-3 months later. And so we went back to Europe for like the third time in 6 months. And then before that tour even started, Cradle of Filth offered us to open for them in the USA. And so then we booked in that as well. And then it was kind of like, oh shit, like that's all our crowdfunding money. Like, what do we do? What do you do now? And so that was then the challenge after that was, okay, well, how do we keep this up? Because at that time we were losing a lot of money. Like every time we go to Europe or US, we were losing like 20,000 Australian, about 15,000 US every tour, minimum. And we're just bleeding this money. And so I was trying to work out, well, we're getting offered lots of tours, but no one's really paying us much. We're getting paid 200 or 300 a show or whatever, and that's not sustainable. What do we do to keep the band growing and keep on the road so we can share our music with people, which is what we've really wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, tell me about like the first US tour, because that was the first. Because I remember first seeing Ne Obliviscaris open for Cradle of Filth 2016 at the Old Masquerade in Atlanta, Georgia, and pretty much ever since then, I think I've seen every show that you've done in Atlanta since then. Then I haven't missed a tour since. Tell me, were you like nervous like going to the US for the first time?
I mean, we were just excited. It was, it was really cool going home from the European tour with Cradle of Filth and getting in a bit of a rhythm with them and getting to know them, and then going home and saying, "Hey, I'll see you in 6 weeks or whatever it was to do it all again in the USA." But we really didn't know what to expect. I mean, there was an element of that too, which was incredibly stressful, where leading up to the tour, we got a heads up in the week beforehand that the visas hadn't come through for some of the members of Cradle of Filth yet. There was a holdup with one of them, and as a result, we were being told. Yeah, so basically, what we were told by their management was they didn't know for sure if the first few shows were going ahead. And so originally we got a heads up there was this delay, and then all of a sudden, we on a few days' notice, we got told that the first 3 or 4, 5, I can't remember exactly how many, in that first 3 to 5 shows were canceled. And the rest of the tour was a question mark. And the problem was that we still didn't know if the whole tour was going ahead, and we were due to fly out. And so I was literally here in Melbourne, Australia, and I'm calling each of the guys one by one, saying, "What do we do? Do we hop on the plane?" Because what we were being told was that we didn't know. Like Cradle's manager refused to guarantee that the tour was going ahead. And we had about 10,000 committed to these flights to the US, and we'd already paid for visas, which is, thousands of dollars and all this sort of stuff. But if the flights we booked you couldn't change the flights. So we could either throw this money down the drain, it's about 15 grand. But if we hopped on a plane and landed in Philadelphia, we didn't have the money to fly back home if the tour got canceled. So we were calling up the airline and the travel insurance and all this sort of stuff, trying to check. And what we had confirmation was that if the tour gets canceled, we can't change our flights. So our flights home were like 5 weeks later. And there was no option to change the flights without basically paying for them again. It was going to cost us about $10,000. And so I remember we had a discussion in the band of, we can either just pull out of the tour and throw $15,000 down the drain, or we hop on a plane without having been guaranteed that the tour is going ahead. And then if the tour gets canceled, we literally did not have the money in the bank to fly home. And so I was like, okay, if the tour gets canceled and we're sitting there in Philadelphia, we are going to have to like loan some money from our families or do a crowdfunding campaign, because we would literally have been stranded in the USA with no money to get back home to Australia. So we hopped on the plane without any shows confirmed, and we did. And it wasn't even a majority, it wasn't even a unanimous vote in the band. There were some guys in the band who were like, this is too risky, we have to pull out. But it ended up being like a narrow majority that went, fuck it, we've never been to the US, we just got to do it, just hop on the plane and cross our fingers. And that's what we did. And it was incredible in the end, because what happened was that while we were on the plane to the USA, our agent managed to book some headline shows literally on 24 hours notice. Like, we're on the plane to the US, and our agent has sent us an email saying, hey, I've got you a show tomorrow in Philadelphia. Is that cool? Can we announce it straight away? And then it's like, yeah, and we can do Baltimore 48 hours from now. And, we added that, and then a show near Boston. And these shows were literally added on like 1-2 days notice. And we landed, we turned up at these shows, and we had like 100 people turn up, and everyone was buying merch, and it was super exciting. And we were like, wow, like 100 people have turned up on literally like 1 day's notice to come see us play. And it was so much fun. And then by about day 2 or 3 in the US, we got confirmation that Danny's visa was approved, Cradle was coming, and the rest of the tour went ahead.
That had to be
and
stressful.
All of a sudden, so it was this. Oh my goodness. Because literally we were like, hey, if we fly to the US and the tour gets canceled, we're in financial ruin. We have no money. We can't do any more tours. Everything's totally fucked. But that's not what happened. We just took the chance. We crossed our fingers. We did everything we could to make it work. We played those headline shows. We did the tour with Cradle, and it was a big success. And then the tour with Cradle went so well that it convinced our agent and the promoters that there was a lot of hype for us in the US. And so we came back only about 4 months later on a headline tour. And that really then pushed ourselves in that market even more. And it was during that same time, because of that hype, that we launched the Patreon. And, is all that sliding doors thing. If we had to cancel that tour, none of that would have happened.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember seeing the headlining tour, and that was great. And I remember a buddy of my buddy's old band opened for you guys, and I was like that. And I think of course with that Cradle tour, that was pretty much what impressed me. Pretty much the one band that live that was just like, wow, this band is awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it's just great to get those opportunities to tour with, bands that you respect and have followed for a long time, and just always been very grateful for that chance. When other bands have kind of offered us to come on tour with them.
Yeah, and of course, Cradle are the homies for hooking you up. I hope you all will do like another tour again one day.
Yeah, I mean, I guess with if we did that, I guess it would probably be somewhere different. Seeing we've done US and the Europe before. I mean, often we're trying to come up with new combinations, because obviously then you expose the band to new fan bases that don't know you. But there's still places we haven't played together, so hopefully it happens somewhere.
Yeah, and kind of moving on to the next album, Earn. I love this album. What was that like going from Citadel to this?
No. I mean, this was a bit of a different writing process for this one. By this time, Benji had moved back to France. Most of us had home recording studios, and we weren't really jamming in person that much anymore, like we did in the early days of the band. And most of the writing was being done by people writing and recording demos at home and sending them around across the world via the internet and email and stuff like that. And so just the process was a little bit different with that. So it was, but in the end, like the writing was not super different. One of the things that we did look at that was a bit different for this record is that we wanted a different approach on the mixing, the production. And so after having Jens Bogren mix the first two albums, we made a change to work with Mark Lewis for Earn. And, actually, there was, or they always get thrown a few different things. I got sick like literally the day before I was supposed to record violin and vocals. And I recorded violin anyway, but I couldn't record vocals. And then I had a flight booked to the US to go mix the album with Mark Lewis in Florida. And but I hadn't recorded the vocals yet. So it was decided at the last minute to just hop on the plane, even though I was sick, and just hop on the plane and then record the vocals with him there in his studio in Florida, which ended up being a really amazing experience because he's such an incredible producer. And I could really hear the difference working with him in in how the vocals for me came out on Earn. And then the production is really very different to the first two records. And we wanted to make this direction of where the production on Citadel is really clear and it sounds fantastic. The catch for us was that people would often be surprised at how heavy the band was at the live show. They would hear Citadel, Portal of I, and then they would see us live, and it was like, wow, you guys are a lot heavier than I thought. We would hear that comment a lot. And that was one of the reasons we really tried to mix up and change the production, because we wanted the albums to sound a bit more like what we are as a live band, because we felt, hey, we think we're a really good live band. We feel like the band is pretty heavy live, and that heaviness doesn't always come across on the records. So that was, I guess, Earn was kind of the beginning of exploring how to change that to bring that across. And then once again, it was also just exploring more different sounds, more layered sounds. Like Eerie was something that was quite different that, I was really very excited, when that song was written, just because it was something really fresh for us. And it was just, another step up because it gave us the opportunity to come out and headline in the US and Europe at a higher level. On the back of that, we did headline tours in Australia that were, much bigger than we'd ever done before. And, and it was the biggest selling album that we'd had to date. Each album for us has, sold more than the one before it. And that's, I think, been a testament to, I feel like, the consistency. Everyone has different favorite albums, but I feel like they're all really good in their own different way. And so, kind of just very proud of each of them, including it.
Yeah, and now flash forwarding to the new album, Exul, which comes out March 24th through Season of Mist Records. What was the whole writing and recording process for that album, being as it has been nearly about 6 years since Earn?
Yeah, so I'll try and give you the short version because it was so epic. But basically, to the cut to the chase, it was recorded in 4 different countries across 9 different studios. Whereas the original plan was that Dan was recording drums in Nashville, USA with Mark Lewis in March, like about maybe March 10 to 12 or 13, something like that, in 2020. And a lot of people would remember March 2020 as like the month that the pandemic hit across the world and for most of the world. And the plan was that Dan was recording drums in Nashville, and then Dan, Martino, Benji, and Mark Lewis, everybody was flying to Australia in that next week to record the rest of the album late March and through the whole of April in Australia. And then in May, I was then going to fly with Mark Lewis back to the USA, and we were going to mix the album. Now, none of that happened except for the drums. So Dan recorded the drums, and then literally Australia announced that they were closing their borders while Dan was flying back to Australia. Like, they closed the borders about 12 hours after Dan got back. So he just got back. But Benji was stranded in France. Martino was stranded in Italy. Mark Lewis was stranded in the US. No one could come. So basically the whole album got shut down. It was about maybe 3 or 4 months later, Tino recorded bass in Italy. Benji recorded guitar in France. Matt started recording guitar here in Melbourne. Violin and Zen's vocals got recorded maybe like April 2021. So almost a year later was then the violin and heavy vocals. I started recording my vocals, I think, about June 2021. But we had a lot of issues. We had a lot of lockdowns. A lot of personal stuff came up in our individual lives, especially for me, which then caused more delays. And, my vocals were only completed in June 2022. And the album was done. They're mixed. We were already halfway through mixing the album at that time. Like, most of the vocals were done, but there was a couple of bits that weren't done. And I actually finished the vocals for Equus here in this room. It's in my home studio.
Oh, wow.
And I had just moved. So I just moved my home studio, which was another delay, like, as far as that the vocals were almost done at one studio, and then I moved and I had to set up the studio again. And some vocals were actually done at Pony Music, a recording studio here in Melbourne, but that got shut down. And, I think it's actually with Equus, the first single, where there are vocals on that song recorded from 3 different studios on that song.
Holy shit.
It's all, it's all the same microphone, and we tried to match obviously the preamps and obviously the mix and all that sort of stuff as closely as possible. And obviously it's me singing, so that it works seamlessly. You don't even know. But it was a lot of work to make sure that oh shit, we have to change studios again. We've got to make sure that it's going to sound the same.
Yeah.
And so it was very, very difficult. And to be honest, at times, yeah, I mean, there was real worry about whether the album would ever get done, because it was just taking so long, because it was over 2 years from when we started to when the album was completed. But I'm really happy that we stuck it out, because when it was finally completed in July this year, it was everything we had, hoped that it would be. And that was one of the reasons why it took so long, because it was like, hey, it's taken this long already. Let's make sure that we finish it at that peak level. Make sure that every performance is the best thing that member has ever done. And just super proud of how it's come out, because I really do think it's the best album we've done so far.
Yeah, and tell me about like that first single, Iquus. I think it's a really great song. It's a pretty much a bold move, releasing like a 12-minute song as like the first single.
Yeah, for me, as soon as we wrote it, I was like, yeah, this is the first single. And part of that was because some of our songs lean one way or the other in regards to being more progressive or more extreme or whatever. And so maybe you listen to one Neo song by itself and people might think we sound like this or that. But Equus was one of those songs, I like in the band, I kind of compared it a bit to something like Devour Colossus, where I'm like, oh, it's like heavy and it has a lot of melody and it kind of goes a lot of different places and has, big epic build up and ending and all that sort of stuff. And I was like really convinced straight up that I'm like, yeah, this song's going to be really popular with our fan base. And it's also a good representation of our sound. When it came to being a 12-minute single, like we don't really give a fuck about anything like that. We know that the song's not getting picked up by radio. And so, we just want to do our thing and share it in a really genuine, artistic way. And, we were excited to share what we felt was a song that was a good reflection of where we're at as a band and a good starting point to introduce people to the record, and just been blown away by the response to it, to be honest, because it's been, I guess, just like by far the biggest response we've had to a single release in our career so far.
All right. And with the new album, Exul, did you want to try something new that you didn't try previously?
Yeah, I mean, I guess with every album, it's always about trying to push things as much as we can in different directions. One of the songs where that was really the case was, I guess, Misericord 2. That was something that, I started writing that as kind of an extension of part 1, which then turned into this, long, sprawling, very progressive, melodic build up. And the layered strings there were much different in sound and color than what we had done before. There's parts in that where there's these really lush sounding, strings, and you got 3 different strings happening at the same time, as well as 3 different violin solo parts, intertwining in amongst each other. And just the amount of different string parts on this record was definitely something that I explored quite a bit. Equus has the same sort of thing where you have string sections, you have violin sections interplaying with each other, then violin solos that are acoustic, you have distorted violin solos, you have violas coming in, you have then cellos coming in later in the song, and that kind of intertwining of the different elements of the string instruments and the different styles of acoustic, distorted, or sections is definitely a lot more prominent. We've done that stuff before, but more just on maybe one song, but that's a lot more present across the whole record. Especially, I guess, with Equus and the Misericord 1 and 2 in particular. And that was, I guess, something that was definitely pushed a bit further. But I guess the other thing that was, I guess, different was just really just trying to push with my vocal performance, to be honest. Earn was really the first album where I really felt confident as a singer. When we did Portal of Eye, and even with Citadel, I was always like the violinist who also did the clean vocals. And the clean vocals were viewed a bit more as a secondary thing. Whereas I guess on Earn, I felt a bit more confident for the first time viewing the clean vocals as like a lead element, like the violin, like the harsh vocals and stuff like that. And so I had a lot of confidence in going into this record that, hey, I'm not just a good violinist, I can sing too. That might sound silly to some people, but I played violin for over 30 years. Singing was something that was a side thing, that it took me a while to, I guess, get the confidence to view myself as a singer on the same level that I am as a violinist. And this was a record where I really, really wanted to showcase the performances at the level I knew I was capable of doing as a singer, and really proud of how it came out, to be honest, because it's definitely, I think, a bit different the way that my clean vocals come across on this record compared to earlier albums.
All right. One thing I want to also talk about is, of course, you and Zen's like vocals and like lyrics. In terms of like having two vocalists, I mean, there's a lot of bands from different styles that have different two vocalists, like Lacuna Coil, Scar Symmetry, Linkin Park, bands like that. In terms of like being two vocalists with you and Zen, do you also have to be like on the same page emotionally when it comes to lyrics, and how do you figure out, okay, who sings what?
Yeah, so what we worked out pretty early on lyrically was that, like when the band first started, I didn't sing at all. And then I started singing a little bit, and I would only sing like a line or two. And so Zen would write all the lyrics, and he would write the little bit for me as well. And that's how it worked. And because his style is quite unique, and different to maybe a traditional song, lyrical writing style, it's never worked to kind of mix lyrical content. So basically Zen just does all the lyrics, and then we talk about what he has in mind for the meaning of the song, and often we'll be having chats about what I feel the emotion of the music is, and then making sure that matches with whatever the lyrical theme is, because normally the music is written first, and so we have a completed song. So like with Equus, for example, we have a completed song with no lyrics, no title, no meaning attached to it. And then Zen will explore ideas about what does the music inspire in him lyrically, which then will come to a particular concept, which then matches the musical journey that is taking place. As far as like how we work out who sings where, a lot of that is just, obviously open communication. Sometimes it's really obvious to us. But when we have a song, the starting point is drums and guitar riffs. And we get a demo created, which is the drums and the guitar riffs for pretty much the whole song. And quite quickly, Zen and I will have a chat about, hey, these are the timestamps at 1:23 and 2:30 and blah, blah, blah. I have ideas for my vocals or violin or whatever, and we'll work out violin, clean vocals, heavy vocals, and guitar solos all at the same time, because it's like, what's the lead element there in each part? And so sometimes if Benji's writing a song, he might send it through already with a guitar solo added, saying, hey, I've got a guitar solo written here, but then there might be empty bits across the entirety of the rest of the song, and Zen and I will go, what ideas do you have, and blah, blah, blah. And so we really just talk about it and go back and forth through there. Sometimes if we both have an idea for a section, we will see if they match together. Like you hear in Equus, there is the I guess the chorus section in the first few minutes, And that was a bit where we both had ideas for that. And it was like, okay, what works together? And it was like, okay, how about we do this bit clean vocals only, and then halfway through on this time, the heavy vocals come in, and then it was just making sure the rhythms and everything fit together. And we would just demo that and then make adjustments. Zen and I have a really great working relationship because there's so much respect for the importance of the other person's role. And that just makes it really easy. But it does mean that him and I work the closest together when we're working out the parts, because it is has to be highly coordinated. We can't just kind of do whatever we want. We have to obviously make sure that there's an ebb and flow. And if there's a lot of clean vocals in one section, I might be, oh, maybe we give the clean vocals a rest, do some violin if there's a good melodic section, or the heavy vocals or whatever. So there's that balance as we go throughout.
Have you ever get in the fights like, I'm singing this part or I'm singing this part?
No, we never have. And part of that is because what happened in our early stuff was, we didn't have the same in-depth demoing process for Portal of Eye, right? And, I remember, I think we arrived in the studio sometimes, and, there might have even been some bits on some songs over the years where Zen would turn up in the studio with ideas for a particular section, and I'm like, oh, I've already recorded something there. I guess we'll see how it sounds. And then it would add in, it's like, you know what? That sounds really great together. Let's just use both. And a lot of bands do have that one or the other, but there's quite a bit of music for us where we do sing at the same time, and especially with like violin and his vocals. There's a lot of bits where I might have a violin solo and he's singing at the same time with long screens, especially at the end of songs and stuff like that. I think the main thing is not to be precious about. It's not like, oh, hey, like you're singing over my solo. It's like, no. Is this good music? Does this fit together? Does it create great energy? And if the answer is yes, then that's awesome. And never being personal about your parts, because it's not your parts, it's our song, and we all contribute to the bigger picture of the song that the band is creating.
Awesome. And you also mentioned that, of course, or over the last few years, this album was done in isolation. Is it like easier to like make music like alone by yourself, or do you need like Zen and Matt or the rest of the guys to like help with the songwriting?
So I guess a lot of the songwriting, when it comes to the overall structure of the songs, everything was already locked in by March 2020 when the pandemic hit. So the guitar riffs and the drums and everything was set in stone. At that time, the only stuff that was incomplete was some songs had violin vocals all done and some songs didn't. That stuff we'll write separately anyways. Like Zen and I will collaborate on his parts, intertwining with mine. But for the rest of the guys, like normally with my violin parts, I'll record them at home as a demo and I would send them across to say, hey, here's the stuff to get feedback. But I'll be doing that, mostly remotely anyways. Like we're not doing that in a room. In regards to the actual performances, it's helpful to have a producer with you that really knows the stuff, because sometimes it's harder to get perspective on your own performances in the moment. Sometimes it's, you got to go back to it a few hours later or the next day to be like, is that good? Because you're so close to it. So that was the thing that was a little bit more difficult. The other thing was that there was such a challenging vibe and a bit of a heavy weight on us and our personal lives and the world and a lot of stuff like that. And so I found it really hard to get myself up for recording my vocals and to get that magic, because I'm listening to some of the pre-pro demos from like 2019, 2020. I'm going, this is like maybe poor recording quality because it was just a demo, but I'm like, the performance was like amazing. And I'm like, that's incredible performance. It's just not good enough quality for the album. And so now I'm doing good quality recordings, but it took me a while to refine that magic in the performances, to be honest,
You
because
can't
this is like a
half-ass
year
it.
or two. Some of this stuff was 2.5 years later. Pardon?
Yeah, I said you can't half-ass it. You gotta like
Not to.
pull it all in.
Yeah, that's right. And for some of these things, when it was like a year and a half, 2 years later, and it's like finding, the way that I sung this the first time I discovered the melody with all that energy and excitement that you could hear on that demo version, finding that again took a little while because I started recording the album stuff and I'm like, technically this sounds good, but the energy and the vibe was not as good as the demos. And so I was like, I tossed it in the bin multiple times. But I'm really happy that that time was taken because in the long run, even though it took a little while to, I guess, find how to do that, by myself in a room, I did get there in the end, and the end result, I think, speaks for itself.
All right, and kind of like going into your live shows, especially now that you have 4 albums out now. In terms of like making a set list, because you have long songs that are like 6 to 8 minutes, and the max is like 12. How do you manage to structure a set list together?
Yeah, I mean, basically, it is more challenging this time around, because I guess in the past we just kind of would make the set list longer and longer. So, it was kind of 75 minutes, then it was 80, then it was 90. And that's kind of how we would make sure we would cover a lot from the records. We really love this new album and we haven't played for a long time. And so we really want to do lots of new stuff. So from that perspective, it's just mixing up the energy of the show, so it's like, okay, what's 'cause I'm kind of normally the one who's normally creating the draft of the set list, and it'll always be thinking, what is a good opener? What then helps the energy of the show flow up and down? Do we have any moments where we want to bring the energy down a little bit, which might happen if you play a song like Forget Not or Eerie or something like that, which has a lot of acoustic stuff. Making sure the show finishes on a big high. And then you might have a few different songs in mind for different roles. So you might have 3 or 4 different songs you really like as an opener or as a closer or as a quieter moment in the middle. And same with all of that. And so, it's just then mixing that up. But, we're really excited for the tours that we have coming up this year. And we'll definitely be playing like a lot of the new album, mixed in with some stuff from every record. We love all the albums, and so there'll definitely be songs from every album included, as well as a bunch of new stuff. So for those that are fans of the whole catalog, there'll be stuff there for everyone. And for anyone who joins the new album, you'll definitely get to hear a bunch of new, fresh stuff that you've never heard before, which is going to be super fun. We're so excited to finally get back on the road and play some concerts.
Yeah, and kind of like to wrap things up. What is there just anything else you would like to promote? I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing you on the Beyond Creation tour this in the fall. Is just anything else you want to promote?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just like you said, March 24, Exul is out worldwide. We have European, UK headline tour booked for May, US Canadian headline tour booked for October, November. We're working on an Australian headline tour as well, which we haven't announced yet, but people stay tuned. That'll be happening sometime this year also. Plus, we're working on trying to get to Latin America for the first time. We've only done Mexico through there before, get back to Asia. And we're really trying to headline everywhere that we can because, we want to play 90, 95 minutes. We want to give people the full experience of what it's like to see us as a live band. And it's also, just fun for us to just be able to play lots of songs and be there with the fans of our music. And so wherever you are in the world, keep an eye out, because we are hoping to come your way. And then I guess the only other thing is, just for anyone who wants to help support us, Patreon is definitely the best way. It is literally more than 90% of the money we make as a profit in the band, and how we support ourselves is through Patreon more than anything else by far. And so, we often get asked by people, like, what's the best way to support you? We'll be buying merch and stuff like that. Everything's helps, but yeah, Patreon is definitely by far the best way. And so it says patreon.com/Ne Obliviscaris. Go check it out. And we're on there hanging out with people all the time, doing different things. And it's only a couple of dollars a month as a base level membership. And so I hope to see people on there. And just thanks to everyone for sticking with us. We were hopeful that people wouldn't forget about us because it's been so long. And so it's been really heartening to have new single out and just have so many people excited to hear it and excited about the new record. So just very, very grateful for that.
Awesome. So everybody, Tim Charles from Ne Obliviscaris. We'll see you next time.